I'm Susan Gardner for Municipal World. We're at the 2018 JLT Public Sector Summit, and joining me in our studio is Jesse Hirsh. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great presentation today. Give us a lot of good insights about what the future holds, and you're kind of known for being a futurist with a perspective that brings in not just the hype, but the realities of what that technology means for us. You said something interesting this morning, that you're leaving the big city and moving out to the country. You said the future is rural. What is that?
I really feel that we've reached a tipping point in which technology affords us such great freedoms and abilities that we don't need to be in large cities. It's not only, I think, cheaper to live in rural communities, I think it's healthier, both from a connected to nature perspective, but also from a friendlier perspective. There's much more of a cooperative culture. It's much more of a collaborative culture. And so I felt that the combination of high-speed internet access and soon self-driving cars is really going to increase the value, both of rural property, but also of rural lifestyle. So I was interested in putting my money where my mouth is and actually taking that leap. But also I really feel that the cost of living in cities, let alone the stress of living in cities, is not just for people who are older, but even younger people are starting to realize that there's a better way. There's another way. Because we can get access to all the world's culture, all the world's knowledge in a community that's human size. And I think that's why, not just for myself, but for a lot of people, rural communities and smaller municipalities are all of a sudden incredibly attractive, and I think actually the future economic engines, because that's where innovation can happen at a scale that you get the support, so that instead of one or two big companies, you get thousands of small companies that thrive and prosper in a way that creates a resilient economy that survives the boom-bust cycles of the markets.
So today, this morning, we kicked off with some discussion about Toronto and the Toronto region, and how there were kind of limitless opportunities for a region like Toronto, but also opportunities for smaller communities in this, some overflow opportunity. What do you think is going to be the pathway for small communities, rural communities to start leveraging?
I think the big one's education. And I don't mean education in an institutionalized sense. I mean informal learning. I mean people learning off of YouTube, people using Instagram to learn new stuff. We're seeing that on an individual level, whether it's professional development or personal development. And I would love to see smaller municipalities and rural communities really embrace that. You know, it's about having learn nights, about having, community meetings that are focused on how to build a smart home, how technology is transforming agriculture, how 3D printing and CNC machines are empowering small manufacturers and small businesses. All this knowledge is available and it's open, but people don't know how to get access to it. There are expensive colleges and universities that are great at offering this, but most people don't have the time. They can't commit 2 years, 1 year, 4 years. So I think by embracing informal learning as an approach to life learning, it gives smaller municipalities and rural communities huge opportunities to adopt the technology, to bend the technology, whether it's to make their farm more efficient, whether it's to create a new home business, or whether it's as an inventor to prototype and start creating new objects, new products. There's no barrier to entry. There's really nothing to stop people from doing this other than the knowledge that they can. So my message to municipalities was really share the knowledge, facilitate these types of learning networks, these types of learning communities, and they'll benefit tremendously, whether from an economic development perspective or from the cultural perspective, that if each one teaches one, yes, and all of a sudden you have smart residents, that becomes a smart community that I think go a long way to helping Canadian communities.
So in essence, they kind of they bring their communities, the people in their communities, up to speed on what's happening now, what's happening in the future, and work collaboratively to find ways to leverage that for the benefit of the community.
And there's many people who describe this as an industrial revolution. They sort of say this is the fourth industrial revolution, driven by automation, driven by data. And the moral of an industrial revolution is you raise all boats, right? You sort of just raise everyone up in terms of the water. And we're not seeing that yet because the knowledge is not being shared as openly and as generously as it could. So I think that's the opportunity. And I use 3D printing and CNC manufacturing as a great example because they're really affordable. They can be housed somewhere like City Hall or in someone's home or in a library. And it really just makes that technology accessible and tangible so that people can be inventors, so that people can design, better tools for the farm or design, better tools for the kitchen. Like, it really doesn't matter what role you play in the economy. I think access to that knowledge and access to that technology does not depend upon a big city. You can be anywhere to get that, especially as high-speed internet access is finally making it into rural communities.
Where do you think we're at today on the digital divide? We still have a little bit. Where do you think we are now? And how long before you think we're able to close that for rural communities across Canada?
So the digital divide was originally thought of as an issue of access, that if everyone got high-speed access, we'd be okay. But now that more and more people have high-speed access, we're realizing that the digital divide is not just connectivity, it's what you do with that connectivity. And the great example, especially amongst young people, is the difference between entertainment and education. You could be using all these tools to entertain and distract yourself as long as you want. Yet you could also be using these tools to educate yourself and learn as much as you want. And unfortunately, that's where the digital divide is really relevant now, is that even though more and more people are getting access, it's what they do with that access that's important. And that's where role models make a difference. That's where community leaders make a difference, whether on the business side or whether on the personal development side. And I think that it's important we remember that as fiber optic connections are now being increasingly extended to rural communities, we have to remember that it's the applications. It's what you do with that stuff. That's really where the digital divide pans out. Now, don't get me wrong. If I was Prime Minister, I would make all internet access free. I would have the government subsidize it so that every Canadian resident can get on the internet without cost, so there's no excuse for them to learn, for them to start a company, for them to engage in the global market. So I do recognize that in many rural communities, internet access is still really expensive. So it's still hard to justify the cost that you're making. But I feel it's worth it. I feel it's an investment in your future, in your family's future. But then it's what you do with it. And that's why I really keep emphasizing learning and knowledge as one of the most important ways in which people can make the most of our new world.
So the future that we anticipated with technology making our lives better, easier, it is kind of coming to pass now, and it is coming to pass in rural communities.
Although I am really excited about the future, and I'm excited about the potential of the future, but at the same time I have to be honest about the mistakes we've made in the past and some of the pitfalls we face moving forward. And that's why I think critical thinking is so important, right?
Yeah.
Technology unto itself is not good. It's what we do with technology that is good, or unfortunately may be bad. And that's why I think we need community discussions.
Right.
Communities get together to talk about spending, to talk about, resources like hockey rinks or curling rinks. I think we should be doing the same when it comes to internet use. Have everyone say what apps they're using, what websites they found, how this particular tool is making it easier for them to do their job or to collect data on their farm. That type of knowledge sharing, I think, helps us get the future we want.
Yes.
And makes it harder for us to make the mistakes that create, whether it's the bullying, whether it's the identity theft, whether it's the hacking. There are real threats.
There are real threats.
But we mitigate them and we make them harder for them to take hold if we share that knowledge and if we teach each other.
Yeah, you raised some points this morning about asking. People aren't asking the questions they need to be about the algorithms that are feeding certain things into their streams and why certain things are appearing on page 1 when really what you're looking for might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pages down, why that's happening, and the role of your own data and having discussions about who owns that and for what purpose it's being used. So,
well, and even the issue of fake news, that you shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet. So this idea that we should critically question things and ask how these decisions are being made. But then the point about data is, where did this data come from and who does it serve? which is I would love to see everyone collecting their own data about their health, about their property, about
Yeah.
their work. We're a long way from there, but I am trying to give people the sense that they can have agency, that they can be empowered by all this. They don't have to be passive, but instead can be much more proactive about the future that they desire.
Great things for us to be thinking about, and this has been a great chat. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming in to talk. Appreciate it.